Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisa Tebo, and I'm going to be delivering the webinar this afternoon. Our title is Creating an Inclusive Work Environment Through the Use of Mainstream Technologies. So I appreciate you joining us. Oh, and I need to advance my slide, and my arrows seem to be gone. There they are. Okay. So let me tell you a little bit about myself before we get started. I am an occupational therapist. I've been an OT for a little over 30 years now. And I'm also a faculty member in the occupational therapy program at Clarkson University in Potsdam, New York. In that position, I teach introductory level assistive technology courses to our graduate students, as well as a couple of elective classes on AT. And previous to becoming faculty member, I was an OT in the school system and started exploring assistive technology close to 20 years ago. And I've also worked as a consultant providing AT evaluations, trainings, professional development, and I've done some work for vocational rehab. So I've got quite a bit of experience behind my belt. But I tell you this because I want to put things into perspective. When I began exploring assistive technology 20 years ago, I think it was a lot easier then because there were only a handful of tools that were available for people to use. So it's a lot easier to figure out what was out there and how to use them. Today we find ourselves in an entirely different world. New technologies are emerging almost daily. And even old technology that's been around for a while is continually changing, integrating more accessibility features. This is great for AT users because things are becoming more accessible. But it's challenging for us as AT providers to stay current and to really know what's out there and what's available. So thank goodness for my students because they really they force me to explore what's out there and learn about new things that are emerging, but they also teach me a lot as well. And we'll talk a little bit more towards the end about developing learning communities and supporting one another and figuring out what's out there. So a little bit about you. I would like to have you guys answer this poll here, telling me a little bit about yourself, like what is your background and why are you here? So let's start with this first poll. Can you all see it? It looks like I'm seeing several responses. Mary, I see that we have one user that's having a hard time hearing my audio. Hopefully this is better. I'm repositioning my phone.
Yep, it sounds much better now.
Okay, all right. If I get a little lazy with my phone, just send me a little reminder. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and skip to the results. I don't know if everybody's had an opportunity to respond, but let's see here. So we've got only a handful of therapists, not very many voc rehab counselors, some special ed teachers, an employer. I'm curious about this other category. If you wouldn't mind maybe in the chat box just entering some of your professions or your positions, and Deb can forward that to me. Okay, AT specialist, a librarian, another librarian, awesome, tuck trainer, AT provider. Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's move on to the next poll. And that is, I'd like to have an idea of what your familiarity and comfort level is with AT. And I have a feeling, now that I see what some of your backgrounds are, I have a feeling I know how this is going to turn out. But just give me some guidance here. Is this entirely new to you, or is this something you've been doing for a while? Okay, let's go ahead and I'm going to skip to the results. Okay, so most of you are familiar with AT, but want a few new solutions. Some of you are very comfortable. I want to encourage any of you, if we're talking about any type of technology and you have something to add or contribute, please feel free to provide feedback or share your insight through the chat box. I welcome your participation. Okay, so let's jump in and get started. Let's review the objectives here. By the time we're finished, you should be able to define mainstream technologies and understand three potential advantages to using them, or at least considering them when selecting AT. Today we're also going to relate technology to the workplace, so that should help you identify 5 potential workplace solutions. I also want you to be able to recognize that mainstream technology won't always be the best option for an individual, and be able to describe factors that might lead you to that conclusion. And finally, we'll discuss some resources to help you implement technology-based solutions in a workplace. All right, so what do we already know about assistive technology use? First of all, we're here because we all know that technology has the potential to make a significant difference for individuals, and that includes employees with a disability. This is supported by research. The example that I provided here on the slide is a systematic review that looked at the outcomes of AT use in vocational settings by people with cognitive deficits. And this systematic review found that AT resulted in significant improvements in work performance, levels of independence, the ability to complete tasks, and to generalize skills. But at the same time, we all know that there's a high rate of AT abandonment. Regardless of the setting or the population, researchers have consistently found that the abandonment rate is at least 30%. Some studies suggest it's even as high as 50%. So while AT can result in improvements in employment outcomes, there's basically a 1 in 3 chance that it won't be used once it's implemented. So what's our solution? Well, one way to minimize the risk of abandonment is to make sure that the technology we select is a good fit for a number of different factors, including individual needs, strengths, and preferences, and the kinds of tasks that need to be completed, the environments where they're going to be completed. There's a number of different models and frameworks that can be used to guide this process. And I think I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. As AT providers, I'm confident that you guys are well aware of this. So keeping in mind that selecting technology is an individualized process, I find it really beneficial to start considering mainstream technologies first that an individual might already have access to. So there are a lot of advantages to selecting mainstream technology. The first is that it can be more cost-effective. When technologies are marketed for the general public, they tend to be less expensive than specialized AT. It's all about supply and demand. But cost effectiveness can expand beyond the cost of the purchase of a device. In many cases, implementing the right technologies can actually reduce the need for additional human support in the workplace. Mainstream technology is also typically readily available. Sometimes an individual might already own their own devices, or an employer may already have access to some of the solutions we're going to be talking about. In addition, the ease in accessing these tools makes it easier for individuals to try them out for extended trials before determining whether or not they actually are a good fit for them. You might also find a higher level of user acceptance. There's generally no stigma associated with mainstream technologies. And if we're looking at a device or solution that the client already uses, that familiarity and comfort with a tool can be really beneficial. So we're going to talk a lot about limitations as we explore different solutions. Just some general limitations to mainstream technology is that sometimes there are limited ways in which you can customize mainstream technology. So therefore, one tool may not meet all of the needs of a particular individual. And you often have to pair solutions with other solutions. But we actually find that to be the case with specialized assistive technology as well. It's not that different. Also, the other thing to keep in mind is that even if we're looking at mainstream technology or familiar technology that an individual has used, we might be asking them to use that technology in new and different ways or more complex ways. So even though it's mainstream technology, there still might be a need for significant levels of training and support and follow-up to make sure that the solution is really effective. All right, so it's probably a good idea to define mainstream technologies. I'm going to be talking about everyday technology, those tools that we see people using, the general public, and often it's used on a daily basis. They're typically considered tech solutions that are not designed or developed for any specific population or conditions. But also I want you to be thinking about the potential to use mainstream technologies to access some of those specialized supports. Also, I mentioned this already, mainstream technologies may or may not reflect universal design. And universal design is that set of principles that promote ease of use for as wide a variety of people as possible. And most of us are familiar with accessibility settings in a phone. That's a good example of universal design. But not all mainstream technologies have this. One thing that we do tend to see is that it seems that technology developers are beginning to see the value of integrating universal design and making their tech usable by a wider range of people. My own theory is that this is probably driven by the market. They can reach a wider market. So that's good news. Let's take one more quick poll. What I'd like to have you do is consider what mainstream technologies you use in your day or you see other people using in your day, and how might they be used in ways to make life easier or more convenient. So just if you want to enter a result, I'll read them as I get them. Okay, so I'm seeing some devices listed: computers, iPad, iPhone, smartphone, Google Hangouts. If anyone can give some practical examples of how they're used. I see making communication easier, using text-to-speech on the iPad, using dictation. These are great examples. Timers to time sessions, using the camera, GPS. All right, audible books, calendars, online calendars. So you've got a great idea of some of the tools that are already out there. I think there's a few that I may have listed that I don't see up here. Siri, Cortana, smart home technology, About fitness trackers? A lot of us use fitness trackers, and there's some pretty cool features that are built right in. All right, so let's jump in here. And we're going to start out by talking about accessibility features. So in my mind, one of the most basic things that you can do for an individual who's using a computer, a tablet, iPad, or iPhone is start by exploring the accessibility features. So I even find among some of my AT specialist colleagues that not all of us are really familiar with the extent of accessibility features that are built into operating systems. So what I find works best is to sit down and explore. Get right into those settings yourselves and play around with them so that you can gain an appreciation for what they do and who they might help. So talking specifically about Windows-based PCs and Macs, I'm not going to go through every single setting that's available, but just kind of summarize some of them. For individuals who have difficulty seeing the screen, there's a variety of ways that you can change the visual display. So you might change the default size of text and icons on the desktop. You might activate magnification and zoom features, maybe change the color and contrast scheme, increase the size of a cursor or arrow, and you can even make things easier to find or follow using keyboard shortcuts. You're probably all familiar with built-in voice recognition. This can allow individuals to use verbal commands to navigate throughout their device, to open files, even search the internet. We can utilize voice recognition to dictate text into emails, documents, even spreadsheets. Similarly, text-to-speech capabilities can assist those who struggle to see text or those who have learning challenges. For users with motor impairments, you can adjust the way the keyboard and mouse are used. For example, you might turn off the repeat key function so that if somebody lets their finger linger too long on the M key, you don't end up with a row of 15 M's. Okay? You can slow down the movement of the arrow so that somebody can be more accurate. Maybe even open up the on-screen keyboard for somebody who would prefer to type using a mouse click rather than the traditional keyboard. One of the things that we see emerging with newer operating systems is closed captioning capabilities for videos and graphic narrators for images. I believe, and you feel free to correct me if anybody's encountered anything different, but I believe at this point in time, these features only work with content that's already created to be accessible. So it's not as if at this point you can just download anything from the internet and use these tools. But it's emerging. It's out there. So the key is get in there and play with those features. One word of advice, make sure that you take note of any kind of keyboard shortcuts for exiting out of accessibility modes so that you don't find yourself stuck. And this is speaking from experience. Well, let's take a look at accessibility features in iOS systems. So I'm primarily talking about iPhones and iPads here. In my opinion, these Apple devices have long been the gold standard in accessibility. And it seems like each time there's a new operating system update, there's new accessibility features added. So again, you need to get in there and play with these features if you haven't done it in a long time or if you've never done it. For those of you who might not be familiar with accessibility settings, the first two pictures in the top row of this slide just shows where to find it. Go to Settings and General Settings, and then you'll click on Accessibility. And this opens up a wide range of settings. So similar to PCs and Macs, you can adjust the visual display, activate voice commands and screen or text readers. You can adjust the way the touch screen is used to navigate, and even turn on switch activation. Of course, there's VoiceOver for individuals who are blind, and you can even select or turn on the ability to use the device's camera as a digital handheld magnifier. I think that one's fairly new. I just wanted to share quickly a couple of my favorite settings. Let's start by looking at speech. So again, if you go to General Settings, open up Accessibility, and then select Speech. Here, you can find options like Speak Selection. With Speak Selection, if it's turned on, then anytime you select text anywhere in your phone, in that little toolbar that pops up that normally says copy or paste or insert, you'll also have a speak selection option that opens up. So this is really helpful. There's also an option to turn on speak screen. So if this is enabled, then it's simply a 2-finger swipe down the screen, and that will activate reading of the entire screen. Something that I think is relatively new, or maybe I just discovered it, is the typing feedback. Okay, so again, that's in that speech section of the accessibility features. And for those of us who've been around for a while, you remember we talked about talking word processors. So the beauty of a talking word processor is that it speaks back words as the individual types them, and it helps an individual recognize errors, and it helps with comprehension. So if you turn on typing feedback, you can activate speak words, and this is in the bottom right screenshot there. And if with that activated, your phone or your device will speak each word as it's typed. Pretty cool. Speak predictions is the last one that I think is really helpful for individuals who have reading difficulties. So we've probably all worked with individuals that struggle to use word prediction because they really can't discriminate between the different word choices that are presented to them. If this is turned on, then the individual simply touches and holds each of the prediction words to hear what it is. Then you can release and tap it to select it. So I think that's a really cool tool that can make prediction more user-friendly for some of the individuals we work with. So of course, anytime we're talking about speech, we want to be thinking about maybe the use of headphones or earbuds just to minimize distractibility and make it, I guess, a little less obvious for the user. The last setting in iOS devices that I wanted to make sure that I point out to you is called Guided Access. As an OT, I love this. This has been around for a long time, but I often find people aren't aware of it. So with Guided Access, you can essentially lock the iPhone or iPad into a specific app and then set up a password that's required for somebody to get out of it. Okay, so for your individuals who really benefit from certain apps, but they're easily distracted by other things like games or the internet, you can limit their ability to leave the app you need them to be in during the times that you need them to be productive. I find it really helpful. Let's shift gears and talk briefly about some accessibility tools that are available in Google. So there's a couple of features in Google Docs that I think are really beneficial. These are translate and voice typing. And you can find these under the Tools tab if you open a Google Doc. The Translate option allows you to translate the entire document into one of about 70 different languages. And it'll create a duplicate document in the second language. I think it could be really helpful. Voice typing is easy to access and use. You simply click on it under the Tools tab to open it up, and you'll see this little icon pop up that looks like a microphone. Click on it and start dictating. There's very little training required, and it works very effectively. So keep in mind that even if somebody traditionally works with Word or PDF documents, you can upload those into Google Docs and convert them and have access to these tools. But some of the limitations are that you do need to have internet access to use them. And of course you have to have a speaker and microphone. So if you're working from a desktop computer, that might mean that you need to purchase an external speaker and microphone or headset. In Google Slides, there's another tool that I think is really awesome, and that is the closed captioning. So within Google Slides, once you're in presentation mode, you just take your mouse down over to the bottom left corner of your screen, and this little toolbar will open with some options. And there you can click on the CC icon, and real-time closed captioning will begin. So as long as you have a good microphone and you stay close to your computer, it will automatically caption your presentation. It's not 100% accurate, but it does provide pretty cool support. I know in our area there's a significant shortage of sign language interpreters, so this tool could be really beneficial for things like office meetings or delivering job training or reviewing instructions, those kinds of things. Most of you are probably already familiar with Google Calendar. This is an old favorite of mine. I think it's just incredibly powerful in supporting people with time management and organization. Some of the nice things is that calendars can be shared. You can access it from a number of different devices. I love the color coding because you can kind of categorize events, in terms of the types of activities they are, or the priority, or maybe by location. There's a lot of different ways that you can use the color coding. You can also, if you haven't tried this, you can edit the details of an event either as you're creating it or after the fact. And I've even used this personally to jot down notes about what happened at a particular event. Or if I need to remind myself about items that I need to bring to an event or something like that. So if you're looking to provide some scaffolded supports in a calendar, this is a really nice way to do it. Notifications can also be set up as reminders, and there's an ability to customize this. So you can send multiple notifications for some events, and you can determine.
Lisa, you faded out again.
I faded out. Okay, can you hold on just a minute? Is this better? Part of it may have been I started to hold the phone a little bit farther away because I was feeling like I needed to cough. Is this better?
This sounds much better. Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, another great feature of Google Calendars is the Tasks feature. And so with the Tasks feature, you can create multiple to-do lists. The list can be categorized. You can include details, due dates, and you can also link the notifications to the to-do list as well. So I'm a big fan of Google Calendar. So let's shift gears again now and talk a little bit about the Office suite, productivity suite, so Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and OneNote. I do want to point out I have a typo on my slide. I have a little screenshot there that says the newest versions of Word, and then I have Office 360. That should be 365. So within Office 365 and Office 2019, there are new accessibility tools that are built right in. Office 365 is free to educators and students. So if you have an ability to access that, that's awesome. It does need to be purchased by businesses. So whether you're using the online version or you have a version that is downloaded and installed on your computer, if you've got these newest versions, there are some pretty cool tools. The screenshot I have right here is using a Mac, and so these tools within Mac can be found under the Review tab. And the first feature I want to show you is the Read Aloud feature. If you turn this on, you've got a floating toolbar, and it will read any selected text. There's a few basic settings. You can change the voice or change the speed of the reading. If you are using the online version, Office 365, this reading tool opens up in something called Immersive Reader, which looks a little bit different, but still has the same text-to-speech capabilities. The next one I want to show you is the Translate feature, and I think the translation feature in this Office suite is a little bit more user-friendly than the translation feature that we talked about in Google Docs. What I like about it is that you can either translate an entire document or just selected words, phrases, or sentences. The other thing that I like about it is that rather than creating a separate document, it just has this window to the right that shows the translation. Okay, so older versions of Word have a translate feature as well, but it takes you out of the Word software and into an internet translation website. It's not quite as user-friendly as this is. I don't know off the top of my head how many languages there are in this, but there's a lot. Okay, another thing I wanted to point out is the ability to easily create alternate text tags for pictures and graphics. This feature has been around for a while, but I think it's been streamlined and it's a little bit easier to use. So this is a feature that provides supports to individuals who use screen readers so that graphics can be described auditorily as a document's being read. This alt text can be created after inserting your graphic by opening picture formats, selecting the alt text icon, and then simply adding in your own description. And the other thing I wanted to add, I haven't really played around with this as much, so full disclosure, this is not something I've used a lot, but I do understand that if you want it to work correctly, you want to have your image aligned within the text so that it is actually read by the screen reader and read in the appropriate time. finally, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about OneNote. This is something that I've had on most of my devices for a number of years and frankly never spent any time exploring until fairly recently. And I'm just amazed at the capabilities within OneNote. So if you have Office Suite, you have Office 365, even older versions of Office, you'll have OneNote. I'm not entirely sure if all the features I'm going to talk about today are available in older versions, so that's something that you would have to try out. But what I love about it is that through OneNote, you can create a document that is essentially multimedia rich. So you open up your document, you can import a file, you can create a text file, you can add pictures that you snap with your device and insert, you can add audio recordings, you can add videos, and if you have a touch screen, you have touch screen capabilities, you can handwrite notes. Okay, so it's just really powerful because in terms of accessibility, there's just so many different ways to create supporting documents or even for an individual to take notes in a training or in a meeting or just organizing their own information. They can do it with so many different tools. It's great. In terms of other accessibility supports that are built in, there's something called learning tools. There are some basic learning tools, but there's also a free extension that you can add on if you're using the online Office 365. But this enables you to also use the dictation mode and immersive reader. If you've got the full version of immersive reader, it's a beautiful text-to-speech tool. And one feature of it that I didn't even know about until about 2 days ago is that you can access symbols and pictures and icons to support the text as well. So it's definitely worth exploring if you haven't used it. This one will probably seem obvious to a lot of you, but virtually every device now has built-in cameras and microphones. And I think these tools are sometimes overlooked in terms of the ways that they can provide a lot of different supports for individuals, especially those that struggle with memory, executive functioning, maybe comprehension, or even language barriers. So video modeling with narration and demonstration of tasks can be incredibly powerful. If you choose to use the camera to either snap photos or take videos, remember to try to do it from the visual perspective of the individual who's going to be using the videos. Okay, that makes it as user-friendly as possible. Okay, the other thing to think about if you're using videos is storing them, naming them, and storing them strategically so that they're easy to access by the individual if they're working independently. Let's see, you can also use the camera to create reminders, prompts, and scaffolding that you can print out and put throughout the environment. You might even consider creating social stories that are related to typical workday activities. Another thing to think about is some individuals aren't strong visual learners, but they do really well with auditory instruction. So it's pretty easy to create and use audio files that can then be accessed with an MP3 player. I know on my Mac I use QuickTime, which is it's a an add-on, but it's really easy to come by audio recorders. So some individuals might enjoy using audio support. They might enjoy accessing information about their workday using a podcast that they can listen to at their leisure. And again, it's a little bit more mainstream to be walking around with your phone and a set of earbuds versus some other solutions that we might consider. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about smart speaker technology, but I did want to touch on this a little bit. We typically think about things like Google Home or Amazon Echo as being tools for the home, but we are seeing them being utilized in other settings as well. And they can provide supports for a wide range of activities. Environmental control, so accessing lights, blinds, locks, telephones, computers, dictating memos and letters, managing the calendar. So there's a wide range of things that can be done. The one thing I like to point out to people anytime they're considering recommending smart speaker technology is privacy issues. So I really didn't think about this until I read a news story over the summer about a couple whose conversation that took place in their living room was recorded by Alexa and sent by email to somebody on their contact list. And this was indeed reported by the New York Times, and it was confirmed by Amazon, and it really started to pique my curiosity. So one thing that I think is important to help people understand that as long as a smart speaker is turned on, it is listening and waiting for you to wake it up. That means that data is being recorded and it's being stored somewhere. So most likely it's being stored in a big server for Amazon or one of Google's servers. And this may not seem like a big deal, but under current legislation, there's no protection of privacy or confidentiality for this data. So there's potential limitations. People need to know that if they think that they are having a private conversation, that it's not truly private in the way that we think of privacy. Just food for thought. Okay, so real quickly, wearable. I mentioned before fitness trackers. They're very popular, and they allow people to set reminders and alarms. They can alert someone to notifications from their phone, track activity, or remind people that they need to get up and move periodically. And some even have features where you can have relaxation breaks that are scheduled throughout the day. So a lot of potential there, and again, no stigma. Everybody's got one. Smartphones, of course, can allow individuals to access apps from their phone. So there's the ways it can support an employee are virtually endless, but there are limitations. The first one, I think most significant, is the cost. They are very expensive, and as we know with technology, they may become obsolete in a short period of time. They're certainly not going to be covered by insurance in most cases. And also, I think just the pure size of it may make it difficult for somebody who has motor and speech impairments. They may have difficulty using it. I've also included up here this invisible clock. This is a relatively inexpensive wearable device. It's similar to a pager in that you can set, well, it doesn't link to a phone call or anything like that, but you can set a number of different reminders throughout the day, and it can either chime or vibrate or do both. So if you have an individual that likes to wear something, or use something that's really discreet, not noticeable, you can have, reminders and prompts set up throughout the day, and nobody needs to know. The assumption would be that it's an individual who cognitively is able to figure out what it is they need to do when that alarm, goes off, because there's not going to be any additional prompts. Okay, but it is kind of a cool, inexpensive little device. Finally, in the right side of this slide, you'll see a couple of examples of noise-reducing earbuds. And we're seeing this, there's a significant market for this. You can find these anywhere from about $30 or $40 up to about $500. So, of course, with the more expensive they are, the more features they have. But, again, thinking historically when we've had individuals who either have auditory defensiveness or maybe they're highly distracted by auditory stuff going on in the environment, we've, recommended the traditional use of headphones. They're cumbersome, they're obvious, and some people may shy away from using those. These are discreet. You see it used by individuals, all over. So these little earbuds, you can find some that have Bluetooth capability, and they can provide either noise reduction or connect to play audio, or devices like the Quiet On earbuds. They are solely for noise reduction. So some of the limitations might be the cost, because these two examples that I have here are, I think the Jabra ones run about $175, and the Quiet On ones start at about $200. They do have to be, they're digital, so they do have to be charged regularly. And some individuals might find them to be more uncomfortable than a traditional set of headphones. Okay, but I thought it was interesting. We bought some of these for our Assistive Technology Research Center, and I had some items sitting out on the table, and we have actually both of these pairs here, and a student came by and she goes, "Oh, cool, I have those in the Jabra ones," is what she was referring to. "I have those in a different color." And it was a good reminder that, yeah, this is a tool that is mainstream. All right, so I don't know if I would consider these necessarily mainstream, except I do hear from students and people in the community that more and more people are using mindfulness apps just for their own sense of well-being. But they can be really helpful in the workplace for somebody who struggles managing stress and anxiety, or maybe who becomes easily fatigued. They just may need to break up their day. The 30/30 app is built on this kind of work break concept. People think of it as that 30 minutes of work and 30 minutes of break, and that usually gets a chuckle from people. Those time frames can be adjusted, so it can be 30 minutes of work, 5 minutes of break, or 10 minutes of work and 5 minutes of break. You can customize it. Be Focused is a little bit more advanced. It can break tasks into manageable intervals, and it also includes a way for individuals to set goals and track their progress towards those goals. Stop, Breathe, Think is similar. It's just a 5-minute check-in. Individuals can use guided meditation, personal reflection, and there's also progress monitoring built in with this. Focus Keeper is similar to 30/30, except it's this concept of completing 4 work cycles that, for example, you might have 25 minutes on task and 5 minutes break. And once those 4 cycles are completed, you can have a larger break. So it's kind of working towards a longer rest or bigger reinforcement, I guess you could say. We already talked about prompts and reminders in terms of wearables, but don't forget the value of just simple timers. I'm trying to use one right now to make sure I get done on time. We use them throughout the day. If you have an individual that knows what they need to do, but they just lose track of time, integrate those timers throughout their environment. It could make a significant difference. Okay, in the sake of time, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this. Just know that there are additional supports that are available for accessing text, including free text-to-speech applications such as Natural Reader, handheld reading pens that can be used like on the fly. Of course, we all know the value of calculators, and if there are math concepts or formulas that need to be used regularly but are difficult for people to remember, think about just creating some little cheat sheets. Sticky notes sometimes can be really powerful that way. So when do we decide that specialized AT is needed? Well, when mainstream tools don't work. Specialized AT does not necessarily have to mean more expensive or more complex. But sometimes we find that an employee has some pretty challenging needs, and usually this is an individual that needs to have a formal AT evaluation to really examine what kinds of solutions will work best for them. Also, if we're thinking about somebody whose needs are expected to change, maybe they have a progressive condition. Some specialized AT solutions have the capability to adjust the way they're used to accommodate changes in needs, whereas that may not be possible with mainstream tech. Sometimes tasks are just too complicated, or we just have a high need for customization and specialization. Just a quick reminder that if we are looking at something more complex, we still need to make sure that we're following good practice and ensuring that there's a good fit between the features of the AT and the needs of the individual, the activities that they need to do, and the environments that they need to do them in. Okay? Well, I kind of lost my train of thought there. This should be a process that you all are familiar with. I know what I was going to say, and that is the importance of those trial uses. If you are recommending or considering recommending a more complex device, more complicated device, try to see if you can find one and let the person use it first to make sure it's really going to do what you think it will. Just a couple of more specialized things that I wanted to touch on. If you have individuals that struggle with task completion, I highly recommend that you check out the Canplan app. The Canplan app, I don't know really whether to consider this specialized or mainstream technology. It's readily available for iPad. It's free. But it is something that's developed for individuals with developmental disabilities or intellectual disabilities. And essentially what Canplan lets you do is create step-by-step video modeling for specific tasks. And there's a lot of options for customization. You can add text supports, you can use a computer voice, you can use pre-recorded voices, you can use video or still photos. So it's highly customizable. And the other thing that's cool about it is that you can schedule the tasks that need to be completed throughout the day, and the app will send the user notifications when it's time to complete the task. So they get a notification. When they open their notification, there's the step-by-step instructions. Okay, really great tool. The users can also, there's a checklist, so they can kind of self-monitor their own productivity and success. I also just posted lesson pics here as a support for task completion. Visual supports are really powerful. And if you're not familiar with lesson pics, this is a very inexpensive online resource. It's, I believe, $39 a year for a subscription, and you have access to a huge library of icons and symbols, and you can upload your own pictures, make your own customized files and stuff like that. So it's a great tool. For health management, a few things I wanted to mention. The Embrace Watch is a wearable watch that can notify somebody of seizure activity. It can sync with a caregiver's phone. The one thing to be aware of at this point in time is that it is funded through a research project. So if you have one, you have to agree to participate in their research in order to have access to all of the features. So I found that out the hard way, but you do have to agree to participate in their research. The Revive watch is just a watch that has vibrating notifications, and Reminder Rosie is a talking alarm clock that can be used to set reminders and prompts throughout the day. Okay, a couple more solutions here. The Ubi Duo is in the upper right-hand corner. It's intended for individuals who have hearing impairments, and basically it's real-time texting back and forth. It's a little bit more appropriate for an office setting than, texting with a cell phone or passing a phone back and forth, and it's a little more professional than a piece of scrap paper. The Pen Friend in the bottom left corner is a tool that can be used to create auditory supports that can be inserted throughout the environment. So the individual just taps the little sticker or the magnet with this pen, and it will play whatever pre-recorded verbal prompts you've created. I think it's a really great tool. Another one here, the Be My Eyes app. If you're not familiar with that, it is a free app for individuals who are visually impaired or blind. And what it does is it connects the users with a sighted person who volunteers their time. And once they're connected through this app, the user's camera is available, the view is available to the volunteer, and they can describe whatever's in the picture of the camera. So a lot of potential uses for that. There's also an app that I didn't include here that's called I Can't Hear, and that's an app that provides real-time closed captioning. Okay, so there's a wide range of other specialized equipment we don't need to go into, but just know that there are solutions out there for virtually any condition or situation that is preventing someone from being successful in the workplace. So where can you get more information? I have approximately 20 seconds, I think, to tell you this. First is think about creating a learning community. I, again, can't stress how valuable it's been for me to have my students, because a lot of times they are discovering or learning about features of technology that I didn't know about. Similarly, like on our campus, we're starting an informal learning community with myself, somebody from OIT, somebody from the Office of Accessibility, the Student Success Center, and we're just getting together and sharing, hey, did you hear about this cool tool? And that can be really, really helpful, beneficial. The other thing is, if you're not familiar with the Job Accommodations Network, be sure to visit their website. They have wonderful resources, and they can provide suggestions for technology solutions based on the type of functional deficit or the type of activity that needs to be accomplished. The third resource there is the National Assistive Technology Act Technical Center and Training Center. So this is where you can find out what your state AT program is and how to access them. So every state has a state assistive tech program, and that program can support you in terms of getting information, but also accessing technology tools for trial and loan purposes. Okay, so this really goes hand in hand with that evaluation process and making sure that a device is a really good fit before you finalize any kind of recommendations or selections. Finally, I put a link to my own website at Clarkson University. We have an Assistive Tech Resource and Ed Center, and our website is relatively new, so it's kind of a work in progress, but we do have a blog with kind of the spotlighted AT in the Spotlight. It's like a weekly blog that my students do, and there's links to other resources, organizations, and vendors. So feel free to join or to visit our website too. My contact information is here. If you want to reach out and contact me, I'd be happy to answer any questions.